Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this month's State of Freight webinar. My name is Brittany Chisnall with the FreightWaves media team, and I'll be your host for today. I'm happy to be joined today by FreightWaves founder and CEO Craig Fuller and SONAR's head of freight market intelligence, Zach Strickland. Today's conversation will cover the latest insights from SONAR, current market trends, and insights from our experts. Craig and Zach will also be answering your questions live following our discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to cover just a couple of quick items. First, if you have any issues during the webinar, please feel free to reach out to our team via the group chat function in your webinar console. If you have questions that you would like to ask our experts, please enter those through the Q&A box in your console at any point during our conversation today. We will answer as many of those as possible during the live Q&A. We'll also be sending a link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow if you'd like to view it on demand or share it with your colleagues. At this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Zach to kick off today's discussion. Zach, let's jump right in.
Hello and welcome, and thank you everyone for tuning in to this month's State of Freight. And of course, the conflict in Iran is still ongoing, so that's going to be a topic we cover today, as well as the, a little bit of softening going on in the market right now, in the freight market, though it is still relatively tight. Craig, let's get things started, man. You've been pretty bullish in this market so far, and I think you feel like you're probably on an island a little bit in some of the economic stuff.
Not anymore.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it.
Don't feel like I'm on an island at all.
Yeah.
In fact, the earnings calls that we've gotten from the large public trucking companies and logistics companies has emphasized what we've been talking about, and it's starting to show up. So it certainly felt like I was on an island 3 months ago, where we were bullish. Not anymore. And I think it's very clear. We got great reports from J.B. Hunt, Knight-Swift, who had a pre-earnings call warning about some situational stuff. LTL is still relatively soft, but we're seeing some of the early LTL reports or early signs of LTL recovering. And you're starting to see broader economic data that is also indicating much stronger activity than I think what most people expected. So I no longer feel like the island's lonely. Maybe I'm still on an island relative to where the general population. This morning I was watching Bloomberg television when the numbers came out this morning on unemployment, the employment data, as well as some of the other GDP data. And it was interesting because they almost felt surprised. It looked like they were a little surprised by some of the prints. Yeah. So in terms of the unemployment numbers were the lowest that they had been since 1969. Think about that.
Well, that's the jobless claim.
The jobless claims, sorry. Unemployment, yes, but jobless claims, thank you. Yeah. Effectively meaning the same thing, but jobless claims are the lowest they've been since 1969. And what is very interesting about what we're seeing is this rebound in the economy that I think has really caught some of the bears off guard. Is that we have been seeing this since November, and I just got back from Evercore had a conference that was held in South Florida. It was at another conference this week, and consistently what I'm hearing is that people are seeing these green shoots happen. They're seeing some increases. And they're starting to, all of them have their own sort of anecdotes of what they're seeing. But I think because of the government data's lagging, and because people expected with high gas prices for the economy to hit the rudders or hit the skids, and that hasn't happened, I think a lot of people are surprised by it.
Well, the economic data has always been a little bit challenging. Anthony Smith, our former economist, used to say that you could pick parts of the economic data reports and build whatever story you'd like to build. And that, I think that's still largely true. But I think a lot of our audience, of course, the data points that I want to talk about primarily, the tender data.
And you said something when you opened, is that we've seen a softening. I wouldn't even argue it's a softening.
It's a directional
relative. It is. I would call it a little sloppy.
Yeah.
Like it's not up and to the right the way we saw it was in March. April's been really since post-Easter. April's been a little bit, just kind of like sidelined.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it.
But we're talking about rejection rates, Zach, at 12.7%. If you go back to where we were even last year, we were down below 5%.
Yeah.
And so yes, where we were in March, it has cooled off a bit.
There we go.
But think about this. These are levels that we haven't seen in years. And so nothing in the data should give you pause. It's also interesting that the volume data, so one of the counter arguments or the bears have brought up in the past is the reason that the volume, the STVI index, the SONAR tender volume is higher, happens, the argument was, well, this is just rejection levels pushing it up. What is interesting about this, if we pull a seasonality chart on this, Will, is you're seeing that rejection levels are actually cooling off a bit, but look what's happening to volumes. And I think we're seeing this big push on volumes. If you go back from where we were in February and March, we're seeing it increase. Rejection levels are cooling. Rejection levels are cooling because routing guides are being reset. That's the thing that everyone should know, is spot rates got well ahead of the market.
Yeah.
Shippers are on notice. Carriers are getting pricing concessions. I have anecdote after anecdote of stories that I have heard from logistics companies, from shippers themselves, big shipper names that I talked to over the last couple of weeks, as well as carriers. And what they're telling me is they either were resistant to rate increases if they're a shipper, did not want them.
Yeah.
Reality is set in. And I talked to a called mid-size $100 million shipper. It's a Fortune 1000 it's a household name, but they only spend about $100 million on freight. And what he told me was he was trying to hold out as long as possible. And he said, "What do you recommend?" He was kind of like, "I've been holding out." And I said, "Look, if I were in your position, I would go proactively to your carrier base and give them a 10% rate concession today." Because I said, here's what's going to happen. If you don't give them something, at some point, they're going to take that capacity away from you. If you are proactive, I said, salespeople don't like conflict. Truckload salespeople, I was a truckload salesperson. It is hard asking for rate increases because you upset your client. And I said, if you go there and you're proactive and you're offering concessions that the salesperson doesn't have to go work for, they will go report to corporate that they secured a 10% rate increase. And yes, that is higher than perhaps you want to do or perhaps you want to pay. But compared to what could happen at the later part of the year, that will be something that locks in that capacity. Because what you don't want is multiple rounds of rate increases, which I have heard some of the larger motor carriers have talked about the fact that they've gone for one rate increase and they're expecting at least one more, if not two, by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think your point on demand is well stated here. The fact that you can get caught up in this rejected tenders debate, I mean, you could argue that arguably the demand floor, to way to look at it, is the accepted tenders. And then somewhere in between this one and the accepted tenders would be a demand level.
It really doesn't. At the end of the day, it's an academic argument.
Right.
And as everything that we talk about is a macro level, no one is pricing off of the volume index.
And we haven't needed it. We haven't needed it.
You're not making pricing decisions. This is all about directional intelligence. We don't capture 100% of every transaction, nor would we ever. There's not a data set that captures 100% of the transaction. It's all about direction signals. And what you know is that volumes are up. We're up 11% year over year. In fact, I haven't looked at it this morning. It's probably up 12 to 13% from a year ago. If you look at this yellow line, that's 2025. And you're seeing a seasonal breakout. I want to remind everybody, this is Liberation Day tariffs. That's that big dip that we saw in April last year, was this really significant.
Well, Easter was later.
But it also was compounded by the Liberation Day tariffs, that air gap that you did not see. Yes, you're right. Easter was. But the air gap is not there. If you look at it in the pink level or the pink chart, that was an increase. But we look a lot more like 23 than we have the past years. And I think the important thing to know, Zach, is that volumes are firming. And we're getting some good economic data that reports. Caterpillar reported today. I'm going to use the phrase blew out earnings or expectations. They talked about really heavy construction equipment moving, heavy duty equipment. And Caterpillar is one of those barometers of construction, farming, ag, big projects. It's upstream to a lot of the activity, because if you're going to go build big data centers, or you're going to build new pipelines, or you're going to build factories.
Yeah.
Heavy equipment is a driver for that, and we sort of soaked up the excess equipment that's out there. One of the things I get asked a lot about is the employment data. So manufacturing employment is sort of the counter argument.
Yeah.
And I always like to remind people that employment is a lagging indicator.
Sure.
Companies will do everything in their power to avoid adding humans.
Yeah.
They will try to find efficiency gains among the staff. They will extend hours working. They will pay overtime, add a shift. They will do a lot of stuff before they go hire people. And so that will always be a lagging indicator versus some of these other data points.
Yeah, I think to your point on the rate increases. So demand, I think the point I want to make here to tie this up is that really, demand has not been a huge component. Rejection rates were at their highest back here, and demand has only gotten stronger.
Demand has gotten stronger.
And we're seasonally about to go into a much stronger demand cycle.
We definitely are, and May is always better than April.
Yeah.
We've talked about this privately, or at least internally. April is historically a weak month. It is weaker of the quarter. It's the weakest part of this quarter. So it's February and April, kind of the really anemic quarters or anemic months. But what happens is you end up in May.
Right.
You end up sort of have this massive acceleration. It's beverage season. When the weather gets warmer, you have produce, you have beverage,
Roadcheck.
construction materials. Well, that is on the rejection side, not on the volume side.
Sure.
But volume specifically, there's a lot of commodities that move from Memorial Day. I think Bo King, a friend of the show, will say, it talks about the 100 days of summer.
Right.
Is that period from Memorial Day to Labor Day is a really intense time for a lot of freight that moves to the freight economy and then you end up when we get into October, sort of September, late September, October is when we get into peak season for holidays. But really, when we think about this, April is going to be the weakest month we will have for the rest of the year.
And it's traditionally been that way. If we pull up S-Try again, Will, and do a seasonality on it, because I think it's important to see, even though we're at a much higher level, I think this is also a little, it's important for everyone to see how high the rejection rates are compared to the last 3 years. I mean, we've really broken out. I think,
that's what, when you were saying it's soft, it's not soft.
It's the wrong word for sure. I was really talking more about the direction of the index.
It is interesting because for you and I that live in this data every single day, I check it first thing in the morning. Now that we have the mobile app, the Blue to Blue app is great because I don't have to open up my laptop. I can check it when I first wake up, and I keep hoping or expecting it to increase. And I'm unabashedly rooting for truckers in this environment. I am, and they have been hurt so significantly due to the Great Freight Recession, and that I want to see stronger conditions. I want to see stronger volumes. Everyone benefits when the economy is doing better. And so I want to see improving conditions, and so I check it every single morning, and it's been kind of flat. It hasn't moved. Kind of boring relatively to where we were. In fact, you could argue that it's kind of gone sideways, and that's okay. We are so much better than we were a year ago.
But seasonally speaking, this is a trough when we're talking about the last 3 years of the freight market.
If you had gone and knew nothing about the freight market over the last couple of months, or you woke up in a coma and you came back, or you went into the wilderness and you came back, and I told you a year ago, and you had left the market, that we were at 13% rejection levels, you would be like, this is insane how much improvement is there. And so it is important to put it in that perspective. If you're not watching the data every day, this is a really strong market. One of the comments Knight-Swift's on their conference call talked about, because they were asked about, Adam Moore, the CEO, was asked about, what are you hearing from customers and shippers? One of the interesting quotes that he talked about was the fact that shippers are now trying to secure peak capacity in April, which is very unusual. It's like they are really worried about peak, about running out of trucks. And the fact that they're being proactive and going to, someone with the scale of Knight-Swift I think is a testament to the fact that they are aware, there is an awareness among the shippers that they have got to secure capacity because there's a risk of running out.
So what are we thinking about the next month or so? I mean, we've got Roadcheck week coming up.
Roadcheck week is really important.
Yeah.
This one's going to be, I think, a really important period of time. We always see the market,
each year
we do see the market react to it.
Yeah.
It has increased as more compliance. Last year was probably the first real compliance. Roadcheck is all about compliance, but it's the first time we saw a big shift in the messaging and the types of things that they're looking for. Every year they have a theme. But I think what's going to happen this year is we're going to see capacity come off the roads. I think there's a lot less. I think among the driver population, they're much more. They know that the FMCSA cares.
Right.
And they know that the DOT is getting directives to really crack down on bad actors, unsafe trucks, non-compliant trucks. So I think we're going to see more capacity taken off the road than usual.
Okay.
And we're going to see a much more sensitive market because there is no excess. There is very little excess that exists in terms of capacity. And so I think we're going to see significant level of rejections. Probably my expectation is we will get into the 16-17% for a week. May cool a little bit after that, but I think 300.
Well, it also is closer to Memorial Day too this year, so we're a little bit tighter there. So
what
we should
is the date of that? The 15th?
Yeah, 15th to 17th. Is that right? Can we get a fact check on that?
Yeah.
But yeah, and then Memorial Day is like the 25th or something this year. It's much earlier.
So it will. So it's very well. If I'm a driver and I'm worried about Roadcheck week, I may go out of market and just skip the entire. Go home and. It's kids get out of school, spend some time with my children, get back in June, where I don't have to worry about the Roadcheck overhang. So I think we'll see more capacity off the road. It's also, there's this element of truckers making a lot of money this year. They're making a lot more money than they have. Even with higher diesel prices, they're much better than they were. And so I think what is probably going to happen is they maybe want to take that time to take a 2 or 3 week break, knowing that when they come back out, things are strong. They don't need to work those weeks, whereas in the past, maybe they felt the need to work.
Yeah, and of course, June and July, half of July really, are some of the strongest in terms of rate inflationry, demand side.
Rejections are always high because of the July 4th holiday. And if you run a trucking company, you worked at a trucking company, I worked at a trucking company, and that July is always a really rough month financially for trucking companies, not because there isn't freight. But because you can't get drivers. Drivers are off. It's for the holidays. They're hanging out with their kids from school.
June is statistically the largest volume month for freight, period.
And it's
across
hard
all
to
modes.
know that. In fact, let's pull that out, Will. Let's pull up STVI. And let's look at this from a seasonal chart because it is interesting. You and I know this because we look at this data every single day. But you're correct. If you look right here, the market, these big peaks, just to remind our audience, these are holidays. Memorial Day, July 4th. But you do see this chart where June is the biggest month of the year. And the reason it's the biggest month of the year is you have the summer, you have produce, construction, auto companies are retooling, redesigning their next year model. They're bringing a lot of that inventory in. You just have a lot of stuff that's happening in the summer that props up the summer.
Industrial production actually peaks this time. We have this weird, it's not weird, it's this convergence of all commodities that we move domestically starts to really come together. Imports don't really hit the market till later.
Now, you do have some back to school that hits in May and June, and you do have some movement, but also companies are starting to, they don't necessarily are bringing the types of, the import activity does not peak at that point. But you do see some of the companies are like, okay, we have inventory. And they start to position it in their distribution centers as they look at the second half. And that's sort of the month of you blow out. And there are some companies that are on end of June quarters or end of June years, and they want to blow out all the inventory. So June is a great month for freight. There's no reason to think that this year won't be extra great. And I have no doubt about this. I love what's happened in volume, by the way. I love what's happening in volume. I love the fact that this isn't just a capacity issue. And I hear that a lot of people talk about this as a capacity correction, and they're absolutely correct to say this is a capacity correction. We know that's happening. But we're also seeing really exciting things happen in volume, and we're seeing really exciting things happen in the broader economic data. Bloomberg's picked up on this. The Journal, Wall Street Journal picked up on it, is that there are signs of reindustrialization or industrial activity happening. And it's data centers. We have a great report, a white paper on this called a SIPREP. You can find out. By the way, Zach.
Yeah.
Do you know on a 500 megawatt data center how many truckloads that is?
I don't, but I know where to look it up.
You know where to look it up, right here. 30,000 truckloads, most of which, I think it's like 55%.
Well, I actually learned like the different sizes of data centers in this report.
Well, I did, I conducted this research. I had been asked about how much of the flatbed market is being driven by data centers.
Yeah.
And I didn't have an answer. And so I went and looked at the data. Here's a crazy stat here. I want to show this stat. So the largest infrastructure build out in history was the interstate highway system.
Yeah.
Now, you could use World War II, had some infrastructure, but put that aside. But the largest peacetime infrastructure build in American history was the interstate highway system in terms of one. We spent $20 billion over 35 years to build the interstate highway. The New Deal, which is part of the Depression, was $167 billion. So when you look at this data centers, $658 billion a year.
Yeah.
We spend as much, and not we. It's not even the government spending the money. These are private cash flowing companies.
Right.
Is spending as much every 2 weeks to build out data centers as we spent on the interstate highway system. And these are, by the way, these are current dollars. This is not, this is inflation adjusted dollars.
Right.
The amount of money going into the AI data centers is absolutely astounding. In fact, in the economic report that came out this morning, they're now picking up this CapEx pull into the economy. And that is what's driving a lot of freight. Flatbed, 7% of flatbed volumes are related to AI data center construction. It is absolutely astounding. The majority, so bulk wins a lot too. You got to bring gravel in, bring in some concrete in. These things are huge. And by the way, these numbers are not even including the semiconductors that are going into it. This is the freaking concrete and the steel and the cooling plant. And this report goes into all of those things. You need transmissions. You need transformers, you need battery and backup, you need generators, you need cooling systems, you need pipe. It is absolutely astounding.
Scroll down, Will.
And so we are seeing this. And one of the other things that I hear a lot, let's go down a little bit further, Dill. I'm going to show you this, peak construction. There we go. Stop. So one of the counter things that I hear a lot of people talk about is the fact that, yes, but these data centers are being delayed or canceled. It's all going to go away. And what you find is you look at the data, you look at the data center build out, the data in the data center, is that actually a lot of the investments are in later parts of the cycle. So it's actually increasing. There's zero signs whatsoever that this stuff is decreasing. I was at a conference a few weeks ago, and one of the speakers talked about only 8% of data centers that had been contracted are currently under construction. Like we have a long way to go. But he pointed out, this isn't just an American phenomenon. China's building data centers. European countries are building data centers. The Middle East is building data centers. And so Asia, Japan, Korea, we're seeing data centers all over the world because every country realizes that they need them. And that cycle of building and construction is absolutely going to continue for many years, and that benefits the flatbed. Now, one of the questions about this is, why is this happening with American manufacturing and not overseas? And so the answer is the big, beautiful bill. Tax incentives that were put into that were specifically incented or directed to drive companies, when they built these data centers out, to use American constructed materials. And that is why the freight market is really cooking in the center of the country. That's why American steel and aluminum are going into these data centers, American copper, fiber. The things that we are importing is the GPUs. Those are all coming, a large percent of them coming from Taiwan, who is absolutely just cooking in terms of economic activity. Beyond that, a lot of these materials are American.
Yeah, Will, let's pull up some charts on, do the flatbed tender reject FOTRI with VOTRI and ROTRI, or not FOTRI, but STRIF and STRIV, STRIR. Because I think it's important to call out. You just said, I think the data center build out is probably one of the biggest influencers to the American economy that we've seen in years, and I don't want to understate it here. And the data center report does a good job of breaking it out. But looking at the flatbed market compared to the other two primary trailer types is what we're dealing with here. This is insane.
46%.
All-time highs, by the way.
All-time highs, flatbed truckload rates,
Yeah.
FTI.USA is at all time.
Right.
We've never measured that. Half
Yeah.
of all flatbed loads are being turned down. I was talking to a trailer leasing business earlier this week. The wait list to get a flatbed is a year. Like to get access to a trailer is a year. There is no flatbeds. These are all driven. But that's not the only thing that's driving flatbeds, Zach. And we actually have a great report. Sit rep, pull it up again, Will. Pull up the dashboard. I want to talk about the other parts of the industrials that are actually driving it. So we've talked about the impact of what's going on. It's not this report. It's down below. Down here, U.S. industrials and the award premium. So this is not just AI data centers. There's other things happening in the data. The Defense Department, military, if you look at defense and military shipments, aerospace shipments, they're also showing up in the manufacturing data. They're showing up in the industrials. That's a big component of the industrials. And we shipped is the wrong term, launched more Tomahawk missiles. 1,000 Tomahawk missiles were launched on Iran over the course of the war, the 6-week war. That is 10 years of production. We produce about 100 of those a year. 1,000 were dropped. So it's going to take a lot of time to build that. The other things that's driving this is that U.S. energy, natural gas specifically, but also oil, is in high demand. And we're starting to see, so we talked about this morning, is that the rig counts did not move. And we've learned, you talked to John Kingston, our energy expert. Why don't you share what he had said about?
So the rig counts no longer are the primary measure of how productive we are with producing crude. Of course, domestically here in the United States, we're the largest producer globally of crude, and we've become so adept at producing crude from the existing rigs and oil wells that they just increase production. And they've been sitting on that until just recently we started to see the rig counts start to tick back up, but we are still down year over year in total rig counts.
But U.S. energy production is increasing. You see it in the rail shipments. We can see those increase. One of the other things that isn't obvious, and I've gone into the deep world of energy, one of the things that did not occur to me until recently that I wasn't aware of, as we drill for more oil, an exhaust is natural gas. We get natural gas as the exhaust fumes. In fact,
you told me
as
this.
Oil, I didn't even realize it. Because one of the weird things that's happening with natural gas prices is they're getting cheaper and cheaper. And as there's more oil wells coming online, even the ones that are less efficient, because we have some oil wells that aren't the cost of recovery was much higher. It wasn't $40 a barrel. It has to be about $80. But as those wells start to produce again, because that's what they're going to tap those old wells out, they have more natural gas because it's an exhaust fume essentially. And what happens is as you produce more oil, you end up getting more natural gas. And because of environmental regulations, the oil drillers will either, they try to burn it off. That's their preferred method. Unfortunately, because of a lot of environmental regulations, that isn't allowed. So they have an allowance of what they can actually do. But they have to pay. If they can't burn it, they're paying to have it removed. And they're actually paying $10 per cubic foot they're paying. They're losing money to get it removed from the field. And what's amazing about this is we are literally swimming in this stuff. We have so much natural gas, and they continue to find so much more of it, that as we continue to build out the U.S. energy infrastructure and open up more drilling, we're going to get natural gas as a byproduct. The problem is that due to environmental regulations, due to the fact that investments were not going into energy-related investments in natural gas specifically, and due to permitting and very slow permitting process, we didn't have pipelines or the terminals that turns the gas into liquid. That didn't exist. It existed, but it wasn't. We didn't make those investments. We slowed down the investments. We are now seeing the Defense Production Act that Donald Trump, I think it was a week ago, the executive order, will accelerate permitting, provide financing for people who want to be in the pipeline business and the energy transmission business. And the Department of War is actually putting in orders. Part of that is they will actually put in orders to help create this. And the point is that this is national security, is that America having a robust energy sector is a national security issue. The other thing, and I want to point this out because this is written in the SITREP, is that I think so many people are missing is that the United States has a cost advantage over the rest of the world in manufacturing due to our surplus energy.
Yeah.
Natural gas is the choice fuel for the U.S. industrial sector, plastics, the polymers, that's all natural gas, not oil. And so in the United States, globally it's different. It's a little, but 80% of that, and it's also when you are building steel and aluminum, you need a lot of heat.
Right.
That is being produced by natural gas. And so our industrials are becoming more competitive because 40% of the manufacturing cost is energy alone. In fact, energy is more important than the labor cost. And so people are like, I outsource my manufacturing to China because of all the benefits of lower cost. What's now happening is that cost delta is not as significant as it once was. And if you can't get your hands on energy, you can't produce anything. So we're going to see manufacturing benefit significantly by our surplus energy supplies in the United States. And as we see more investments, it's going to drive it. It's just a compounder.
So the counter, like obviously a lot of our audience cares about fuel. So we should probably talk about diesel.
We should talk about diesel.
And pull up the DTS and ULSDR, Will, on a chart. I think this one is, this gets asked to me numerous times. And they're like, well, what about, you're telling me the energy costs are going down.
Well, I'm talking about natural gas.
Okay, well.
I'm talking specifically about natural gas energy costs.
What about our diesel here?
Well, diesel, so there's two components of diesel. One is this is the DTS, which is the truck stop price. By the way, I was talking to some folks, some of the logistics people, executives talked about how they anticipate on Tuesday when that DOE price comes out. They just, this is like a thing, right? You can't wait until Tuesday to get it. I said, guys, if you have SONAR, you get this price every single day. This diesel price will track very closely. It updates every 24 hours.
Every day.
We are updating the diesel price. So what we saw was this pretty significant spike in retail diesel.
Yep.
And then as we started to see the end of the military conflict, not the blockade, we actually saw the price of diesel come down. It hasn't come down very much. Wholesale did come down. It's very reactive. It reacts within really same day when there's a development. It is now marching up. WTI is at $110 a barrel. It's quite high. But still, there's nothing in any of the data that says that higher fuel costs, whether it's gasoline or even diesel, is sapping the U.S. economy. It's not showing up in any of the data. There's nothing currently. Yes, there are individual pain points. If you're a carrier that does not have a fuel surcharge, you're definitely having to pay higher diesel prices. But if you look at what the rates are in terms of the offsetting spot rates, you've been able to recover all of that and potentially more.
Well, let's pull out the ULSDR. That, of course, is the rack or wholesale
the rack price. And by the way, I say this is regardless of how you're buying your fuel, buy it on rack. Because what we saw here is that the truck stops are reluctant to lower price of diesel. They just will be very slow. They're
much slower.
For reasons they don't like the whiplashing effect.
Well, they also buy in bulk in front of things and they hedge it moving back and forth.
That's their argument. They have no problem taking it up really quickly.
They don't bring it
They're
down
like, well,
fast.
we have all this fuel
Yeah.
and we buy it and it's slow. And I'm like, well, but you had no problem in increasing it.
But they don't have to.
But
move it.
they very slow to let the air out.
Pull up the
But
NTI.
if you're buying it on rack, you do get those benefits passed on to you within 24 hours. That's the nice part about rack.
Yeah, put it on top of put NTI
wholesale
on top of
cost
this
plus.
because I want to show the influence of fuel because this comes up a lot.
You want on NTI.USA.
NTI.USA on top of DTS and pull it back to about 5 years. Just do a 5 year on it. Because I think people think that, and again,
Well, but these are a little misleading because this is a entirely different index. But go ahead.
yeah, he put it on there on dual axis. So the movement is, of course, the thing that I want to focus on because there is the conception that as fuel prices go up, so do spot rates.
And
As you can see here, that's clearly false.
yeah.
Completely disproven when Ukraine invaded, or Russia invaded Ukraine, spot rates moved inversely
This
to fuel
white
prices.
is your diesel price. It shot up. Spot rates collapsed.
And you can make the argument carriers had inflated rates at this period of time, so it didn't really matter as much. But what about here?
Right here, you saw diesel prices go up, no movement in spot.
Didn't care. Nobody cares.
You see these two are misaligned as you talk about. This feels highly aligned.
Yeah.
But this was happening. The reason that the important thing is the tightness in capacity enables motor carriers to have pricing power.
Yeah.
And yes, certainly they were feeling the pain on diesel.
Right.
Had it not been for tightness and capacity, they would have just eaten it.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the brokers that are buying the capacity in the spot market don't really care about the trucker's plight when it comes to diesel. It is a negotiation factor.
Right.
And it is used in negotiation, but it doesn't necessarily matter.
On the spot market.
On the spot market.
Yeah.
Diesel on contract, it gets priced in higher fuel surcharges.
Let's pull up the VCRPM 1 on top of the NTI, Will, because I think rates, of course, you were talking about this earlier, Craig, about how contract rates were now starting to increase meaningfully, like on top of, we have this, VCRPM 1 is based off invoice data. And we get increases in this index at times that aren't necessarily permanent increases. It's due to route guide deterioration that's temporary. And we capture both the temporary deterioration in route guides as well as the permanent increases. And the reason we can tell it's permanent is that it does sort of what it's doing right here. It's starting to sustainably stay elevated over this period of time. So, we can keep these on.
I actually think it's easier to see. Go to the executive dashboard, Will, and it's right here. So this is spot, this is contract. I think this chart's just so much easier to understand. These were largely moving in tandem. And then you have this massive breakout of spots pulling on the contract rate. That contract rate is moving up.
And look at this. This is October. So there's actually roughly a 10% increase from October to where we are now.
Yeah, and I think we'll continue to see, the earnings reports of some of the larger carriers talked about double-digit rate increases are pretty much expected to hit. That feels like a lot, but it's not. We're down still 20-something% from where we were 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. So we're definitely going to see increase in contract rates. That is baked in. As long as this delta exists, then that spot rate is going to continue to pull on contract. And that's why I believe rejection rates are slowing down because companies are now giving price concessions in contract. They're accepting higher contract rates. And they're like, look, I don't want to buy on the spot market because I don't want to pay the spot market rates. I don't want to lose access to capacity. I'll take a higher contract rate to offset that.
And largely the spot market rate has been the most discounted rate in the market.
Yeah, and this doesn't do justice to it because ultimately fuel surcharge, these should not be as tandem as they are.
They're not. This includes fuel. This includes fuel. This is an all-in.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It shouldn't be, that looks tandem is what I mean by that. But what we're seeing now is a natural order of things in terms of tightness.
Well, we got to talk a little bit about the regulatory. We've got Delilah's Law that's still on the table.
It's going through iteration of Congress. I was talking to Matt Leffler, the armchair attorney. He and I do Freight Expectations, which is a weekly show we just riff on all sorts of topics. I asked Matt, I was like, yesterday. I was like, what is the status? He said it's still in committee.
Right.
And he's like, look, there's a lot of other priorities in Congress that are probably getting more attention. Like we still, Department of Homeland Security still doesn't have a funding bill. Like we're still dealing with a lot of just issues. And so his anticipation is Dalilah's law. In fact, he had argued, and I think some people will be disappointed to hear this. He's like, look, the congressmen got to have their photo taken with Dalilah and her father. Mm-hmm. They've gotten the credibility to the public, but they have other priorities. Yeah. And it's unfortunate because some of that momentum may be lost. I got the impression from talking to Matt that it probably isn't as pressing as what our industry wants it to be. Mm-hmm. Plus, you've got to remember midterms. Yeah. And they don't do anything fun. They don't do anything good in the second half of the year. You're campaigning.
You're talking about the net impact to this could be as much as 600 to 800,000 drivers.
JB Hunt, it was Noel Perry.
Yeah.
Your good friend Noel Perry wrote an article about the impact of how much capacity gets removed, and he had estimated an issue of 600,000. Mm-hmm. He now argues it's 800,000, and the majority of that capacity, I think it was UBS had a report on this, they believe is long haul capacity. Is that over the road long haul is where the majority of the folks that would be impacted by that are coming from, not the short haul market. So it's certainly going to show up in the long haul market.
I mean, but that number itself is insane.
It's absolutely insane. And we haven't even seen that. I mean, arguably the number of drivers that have been taken off the road due to compliance crackdown is about 35,000 is the number that I sort of believe is trackable.
Right.
Now, what that 35,000 number, we've seen the impact of what 35,000 does in terms of capacity.
Yeah. What
you're not really seeing in that, and you'll never know, is how many new truck drivers would have come into the market that have not come into the market. We just don't know that number.
Right.
But we know it's having some impact. Plus, you're seeing things where now the Postal Service in 2 weeks, actually next week, tomorrow, the Postal Service has banned drivers that do not non-domiciled CDLs. Basically are out of their network.
Well, they tried to do this in October and they quickly pulled back.
Totally, I think it was August actually, 2 days later.
Yeah.
In fact, I was talking to someone yesterday who is very close, that used to run the postal network, transportation network. She told me,
God bless her,
that there's no way the Postal Service is going to be successful.
Right.
She's like, this is such a pervasive thing that it is, politically they're going to do it, but in terms of the consequences of doing it, she thinks are quite significant.
You're saying that the politicians have a little disconnection between the practicality
of how pervasive
that's a new
non-compliant line haul drivers are. Is much bigger than what most people expect it is. And so
have they not done any data or studies on what that impact might be?
I can't answer. Okay. And I hate to talk out of turn. Yeah. They definitely were caught off guard, and they said this in a presentation that we reported on FreightWaves, that when they first attempted to roll it out, and I think it was August, they realized really quickly they weren't going to load any non-domiciled CDL drivers. And they realized really quickly that they couldn't do it. And so what have they done in 4 or 5 months? I don't know, but this is certainly something to watch. Yeah. But I do think we see this movement. Also, all eyes on the Supreme Court. Yeah. The Montgomery decision, the C.H. Robinson Montgomery decision, is going to be probably the biggest story of the summer in terms of potential impacts to freight, because that will completely change the way brokers operate in this market. It's going to make it.
Well, explain it. The detail.
Yeah. So it's the Supreme Court that has to do with broker liability. Right now, under federal law, is that freight brokers cannot be held liable, even in negligence, cannot be held liable for a truck that gets into an accident. Accidents happen every single day. And if we think 30% of the freight is brokered freight, then at least 30% of those accidents have a broker somewhere in that mix. But because of federal law, the F4A had to do with federal aviation funding and some weird rider that was put on in the 90s, brokers cannot be brought into state courts in terms of being sued as a contributing factor in the accident.
Right.
There are certain exceptions to that, but generally it's viewed as they're completely exempt from liability. The problem that you end up with is that trial attorneys are always looking for the deepest pocket. They look for anyone they can sue. If you've ever been in a lawsuit, they take out everybody.
Yeah.
And they just try to find pockets of money. And so what ends up happening is that even if you are insured, you're still going to spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars defending yourself. And the issue is that most brokers don't have the level of insurance that they need. They probably don't have very clean, you were in freight, I was in freight. You're not as clean as you should be. And it doesn't even matter because you don't actually have to prove.
Right.
In fact, there was a lawsuit this past week. John Kingston wrote about it. It's a nuclear lawsuit out of Utah, where in the initial trial, $86 million nuclear lawsuit, by the way, $81 million. In the trial, it was determined that there was no fault.
Yeah.
The driver was not at fault, was not negligent. However, and again, this is getting into a legal argument.
Right.
Somehow the lawyers that were suing, the plaintiff's attorneys, were able to go back to the courts and under some technicality, be able to get the courts to award $81 million, which means in the trial, they were not at fault. But still, the dude's getting paid $81 million from Brad Jacobs' QXO. And that is the challenge. I mean, QXO's got this massive, it's Beacon Roofing, it's got this massive, imagine the level of attorneys that they have. You're talking very expensive attorneys, and yet still, this is a nuclear lawsuit. I don't think a lot of brokers are prepared for that. And I think the problem is, and this is what I hear, is I'll just go get insurance. Great. For everything going forward, you'll get insured. Great. Fantastic. Good for you. The problem is every single trial, every single case that's currently in the court system will be amended to include you. And in fact, the Delilah's case itself is not moving forward right now, waiting on the Montgomery decision because they're waiting to see if C.H. Robinson can be held liable. And so it's going to be really important to watch if you're a freight broker. It will change this market. I have argued that this is an extinction event for a lot of brokers. They're simply not ready for the cost that's going to be bared, the regulatory compliance elements. You and I worked at an asset-based trucking company. It was drilled into us about regulatory compliance issues and safety issues. The brokers don't actually know enough about the truck to make those decisions, but they can be brought into this, and that's why this is incredibly important for us to watch.
Yeah, I mean, huge stuff. Thank you for that. And I think,
and one of the things is, like, there is a question that if brokers can be brought into it, can shippers be brought into it? And that is another outstanding question. Matt Leffler is the armchair attorney. If you're interested in this topic, Great Expectations. We record it every Friday. We post it over the weekend. I recommend you check that out.
That's why I wanted you to talk about it, because I know you and Matt do a great job of covering all that. Matt is fantastic on that, but we need to get to some Q&A. I'm sure there's questions. Brittany, I don't know if the time slot made a difference or not this time, but let's have it.
Yeah, like you said, we will begin taking some questions from the audience. So if you haven't already submitted those, you still have time. So just type those into the Q&A section. We do have several that have already come in.
All right.
We'll start with this one. Can we say that based on the STVI data that the freight recession is ending?
Oh, it's dead. I mean, like, this isn't just my opinion.
No.
You can go listen to any. I think when J.B. Hunt declared it dead, the first public trucking company to do earnings, in the January, they were very conservative. They were not ready to make the call then. I think that's just the nature of J.B. Hunt. Plus, you're public. You got to be careful.
You got to be careful. You can't step out.
But I think it's very clear from every single earnings report, whether it was Werner, Knight, Covenant, J.B. Hunt, C.H. Robinson. Like, you go down the list, there is no freight recession right now. We are clearly done with it, and it is being affirmed not only in our data, but a lot of the. And look, we got ahead of this last year. I got ahead of it last year, where I was declaring it dead in November of 24, right around the election. There was that massive pop in activity that we saw. That was premature. It was clearly not dead. There is nothing, no one is saying that the recession is continuing.
Yeah, I think S-Tri is the better indicator of this, because When you're talking about pure demand signals, that's what STVI is. And STRI itself.
That was what I talked about right there.
Yeah.
It just didn't sustain.
No.
And so
we
had a holiday pop. We had some short-term inventory movements.
I think you were right directionally. It was just we did it during a holiday, and then we didn't foresee the Liberation Day tariff situation and all that going on. And then all that did was kick the can down the road for a year. Right. And now we're in a true turning point, because rejection rates, of course, to me are more of an objective signal, because carriers turning down loads from their customers.
Actual loads. It's not load board activity. Yeah. You're not doing searches and posts. It's all about, does a motor carrier, because they have to pay for these. Yeah. Like, these are all EDI and API transactions. They're paying to tender those over.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to, these message flows cost money. And therefore, they're not going to reject something. They're not going to send something unless it.
Well, also they don't halt air.
Yeah, these are actual orders.
Yeah.
I need you to show up at this time. Trucking company saying yay, nay.
Yeah, they don't do that lightly, especially after 3 years of averaging a 4.5% rejection rate.
Cool. The next one, with spot running 15 to 20% above contract ex fuel and carriers pushing for double-digit contract increases in bid season. How quickly do you think the gap closes, and will this hurt demand?
The largest carriers, I've talked to a number of CEOs, probably 10 of the top 20 C-suite executives at these firms. All of them are not only asking for rate concessions or price increases, they're all getting them.
Yeah.
I've heard numerous stories of where a motor carrier goes in to ask for a rate increase, gets a lot of pushback from its shipper, and the carrier walks away and says, we're not taking it. I've also heard stories where companies participated in bids. They didn't want, there was one motor carrier, large asset carrier, that had one of its large customers, and they wanted rid of some lanes, which may be foreign concept to brokers, but trucking companies try to manage their networks. And they said there was this set of lanes that they didn't want. They wanted to walk away from about $5 million of business. And so they went and took rates, and they marked it up by 40%. And they're like, good, we're not going to get any more of this freight. Mm-hmm. Not only did they get the volume back at a 40% rate increase, they got more volume. Right. And they said this was really surprising to them because shippers were doing it. I heard other stories where a large a shipper told a motor carrier, the motor carrier wanted a 12% rate increase. The shipper said, no thanks. They said, fine, we're taking our trucks. Mm-hmm. 2 days later, got to fall back and said, okay, we give. Because I think shippers, for those that haven't gone through a carrier cycle, are going to test and test and test to see if it's real. Yep. And once they know they're about to lose a lot of that capacity and there aren't a lot of other options, they're going to come back for those rate increases. So rate increases are definitely happening. I think the magnitude of rate increases are the question. Yeah. I think C.H. Robinson said something 17%
by year end, and we're already at 10. So
yeah, so we are certainly continuing to see more movement in rates.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that grow throughout the year based on the tender data itself. I mean, we have seasonal tightness coming with the increasing demand over the summer. You might get a couple of breaths of fresh air, but then you have imports returning later in the year.
Second half of the year. And look, what's been driving this market is not consumer retail activity.
Exactly.
It is largely industrials. Yep. And imagine a scenario, like, you know what's not participating? Housing.
Yeah, housing is garbage.
Absolutely.
A 6.5% mortgage.
and I think it's interesting how dynamic and how tight this market is, and frankly, how robust the volumes are relative to what you would expect without even housing. Yeah. If housing were to come back, if housing were to surge, then I think this becomes a very different market. But I don't think the flatbed guys are missing it.
No, they're not.
Frankly, the AI data centers are paying a lot better than lumber. They love it.
Amen to that.
Awesome. We still have 6 minutes left, so keep those questions coming if you've got them. The next one, are you seeing that more and more shippers are capping the fuel surcharge while we see increases?
Capping fuel surcharge? I don't know. It's all about it. Like
that's an individual negotiation, right. And I don't. It's very unusual to allow that, except for at the largest shipper level, because the carriers, of course, are capping their exposure to the volatility of the fuel market.
Yeah, I think that's any shipper that's trying to cap fuel surcharge is quite foolish in this market because what you're signaling to the motor carrier is massive misalignment.
Yeah.
Because it's basically saying, I know you got to pay higher fuel, but I don't care.
Yeah.
Now, I do think we see situations where companies are doing cost-based fuel programs, like through breakthrough fuel. Those types of situations where they're looking at the wholesale cost of fuel, I see that being more realistic. Some of the other games that shippers will try to play is, hey, we were at a 6.5 mile per gallon. The newer trucks are more efficient. They increase it to 7. That, in many ways, lowers that fuel surcharge accelerator. But in terms of capping, I can't imagine a scenario where if I'm a motor carrier, I'm accepting that.
We used to get asked this question, and this maneuver is not going to work like you think it does in this environment because the carriers have the ability to pass along that cost. And what they're going to do, if you cap the fuel surcharge, they're just going to increase this rate. They're going to increase the base rate and bake that in as a risk factor. So you're going to actually increase your base rate.
Look, if I'm a shipper and I'm running a traffic department, it's a lot easier for me to go to my CFO and explain that I blew my budget because of fuel cost than it is to go and explain to the CFO that, yes, I saved all this money on fuel, but I lost it on line haul. That just doesn't seem like something.
I don't think a lot of companies understand that dynamic. We just went through a whole chart about how fuel costs don't get passed along in a soft market, but they sure as heck get passed along in a tight market.
Yeah, that would be the last place I would touch.
And there's numerous other costs that are in carriers, costs.
Well, driver wages are definitely going up. I mean,
they went up significantly since 21.
Driver wages are definitely going up.
Do a 5-year on VCRPM, Will, and this is really why inflation is able to pop too. I mean, you could remove the COVID kind of deterioration. They were making money here, obviously. Down here, they really weren't making money.
No, every mile they ran, like they may have been generating cash flows.
Yeah.
But in terms of replacing that equipment, they weren't able to do it because they weren't able to make money to do the replacements. And now, when they go buy equipment and they put those new truck orders in, those new trucks are $50,000 more. So we went from $150,000 to $200,000 for new trucks. That is a lot to swallow.
And they were not passing that along. Everyone's worried about fuel.
They couldn't. They were just happy to be in business and have freight. Now it's a very different environment. So fuel will be the last place I would touch.
Yeah.
If I were a shipper, what you're signaling is that you have massive misalignment. You simply don't care. Be more. If you're going to be ruthless, be on the line haul rate because it's a lot easier for a carrier to understand you don't want to pay more for line haul than it is to say I don't care about your fuel problems.
Yeah, especially now that fuel costs.
Because it's completely out of their control. No one has control over fuel.
Yeah.
Except maybe Donald Trump.
You don't trust, there's a trust issue, clearly. Yeah.
So staying on the topic of fuel, how much of the current fuel volatility is structural versus temporary tied to the Iran conflict?
I mean, all of it is tied to Iran. In fact, we were so awash with fuel before that there was a lot of conversation. If you go back to December, January last year, conversations about getting down to a $30 barrel of oil on WTI. And a lot of the oil folks in the oil patch were really stressed about the loss of pricing power in the oil market because the United States is producing so much oil that it's flooding the market. And so the structural problems right now is it's the war, it's Hormuz. Venezuela has not, up until recently, hadn't been participating in oil markets. It's going to come on faster than I think a lot of people participate because they have so much capacity. And so high oil prices are a factor at Iran, but as we see more and more diversions around Hormuz, with United States as a participant in that, you're going to see oil prices come down.
Yeah.
I've talked to people in the oil business that say the fact that we're not at $200 a barrel is with the worst squeeze in history or recent history is a reflection on just how oversupplied the market would be if it hadn't been for Hormuz.
Yeah,
I think frankly that gives the United States and the administration a lot more leeway in strangling Hormuz longer for a blockade that oil isn't at $180 a barrel.
And of course, this is to answer the question, this is mostly speculation. If the war goes away, it doesn't all go, the price does not come down immediately in that environment, but a lot of it does, because it's not necessarily, we're in a shortage environment, like you said.
Looks like we have time for one more question. There is typically a lag between cycle recovery for truckload and when it shows up in LTL.
Great question.
When
Zach,
do you think we should see meaningful inflection for LTL carriers?
Let's pull up our new LTL ticker, Will, LTL.USA, and let's put it over the top of VCRPM.
I have not even seen this one.
Oh, man.
I think I was out of town when we released it. So.
Yeah, so the LTL market typically, and you're going to have to do it on a dual, because this is a revenue per hundredweight index, mind you, directional indicator. Normally we see the LTL market follow truckload by roughly 3 to 6 months. Look at this knee-jerk reaction. I really think, and the way that I've been explaining this is, in January, February, LTL pricing did not really adjust to the truckload market because LTL does not have a holiday peak season in the same sense that truckload does. It's not as retail exposed. But I think that they were actually starting to give a little bit of rate concessions, especially in the denser class bands, to start the year, because that's their softest point of the year, being behind the truckload market, not realizing we were in the midst of a cyclical shift.
Cass's shipment index is higher weighted for LTL than truckload.
Yeah.
It kind of always drives me crazy when people benchmark truckload against Cass's shipment index, because it has so much LTL in it. And LTL later in the recovery. So what happens is companies, you know this, you spend a lot of time in LTL, as shipment orders increase, companies are consolidating those LTL shipments. When the market's soft, they may only get a pallet or 2 or 4 or 5 pallets, but when the economy starts to come back, they're getting bigger order shipments. So they're able to put it into truckloads, so you actually pull freight away from the LTL market. And here's the interesting thing. I want to show you this, because I just saw this today.
Okay.
Look at the drop in truckload and look at how LTL maintained above 40. That is yellow right there.
Yeah, it's yellow exit.
That's all yellow. And basically there was a short-term reaction to it. The market repriced it, and then it's sort of on its way. So we are seeing, and you are getting earnings reports that the LTL guys are talking constructively about the freight market.
But they only got 2 out of 3 months. So that's why you're going to get a little mixed signals from the earnings calls on Q1.
Awesome. Well, that is all the time that we have for today. A special thanks to Zach and Craig for being here this afternoon. It's always great to have you guys sharing your insights with us. And as always, we appreciate our audience as well for joining us for these events each month and asking such great questions. FreightWaves is bringing you some events over the next couple of months. We have the Freight Fraud Symposium coming up on May 20th in Cleveland, Ohio. And then we have a virtual event, the Domestic Supply Chain Summit, happening on June 17th. You can register for all of our events at live.freightwaves.com. And don't forget to mark your calendars for the next State of Freight on Thursday, May 21st. We can't wait for you to join us again soon. Thank you, everyone.